They say the devil doesn't always come with horns. Sometimes, he comes with charm, kindness, and eyes that see through your soul. That night, I wasn't a pastor's wife. I wasn't anyone's example. I was just a woman. A woman tired of pretending. Tired of smiling through emptiness. Tired of praying for something that no longer felt alive. It started with laughter. Innocent, effortless laughter, the kind I hadn't heard from myself in years. But before I knew it, one conversation turned into confession, one glance turned into a touch, and one night, the night that changed everything, made me forget the vows I once swore before God. This is my story, not to justify what I did, but to reveal what happens when even the most faithful heart reaches its breaking point. Stay till the end, because what I learned might just change the way you see temptation, guilt, and forgiveness. People often imagine that being married to a pastor means living a spotless life, one without temptation, one where prayers replace passion and holiness fills the spaces where loneliness might hide. I wish they knew how wrong that was. Behind every perfect sermon and every Sunday smile, there's a woman, me, trying to balance between being a wife, a mother, a leader's shadow, and a human being with needs she's not supposed to have. For years, I convinced myself that being the pastor's wife was enough of an identity. My husband was adored, respected, even feared a little for his discipline and moral authority. I was the woman everyone looked to for example, modest, soft-spoken, a reflection of his perfection. I smiled through exhaustion, prayed through pain, and dressed my emptiness in grace. No one ever asked me how I was doing. Maybe because everyone assumed I was fine. But I wasn't. Somewhere along the way, I forgot how to feel alive. Every morning was the same. Devotion, breakfast, counseling sessions, church visits, endless phone calls. My life became a routine of giving advice, giving comfort, giving everything of myself, until there was nothing left to give to me. My husband was kind, but distant. His love was spiritual, his affection always measured, his attention divided between his flock and his family. When we were alone, it was like praying with our eyes open, intimate but empty. I used to believe that the quiet ache inside me was a test from God. That if I endured it, I'd be rewarded with peace. But that peace never came. Instead, I learned to bury the ache deeper, behind every Sunday dress and practiced smile. Until one night, I realized that something buried for too long doesn't die, it waits. It was during a church retreat, ironically. A weekend meant for reflection and spiritual renewal. I remember the first evening, the choir humming in the background, candles flickering, laughter from the younger volunteers echoing down the corridor. And there was him, Daniel. A guest musician, younger than me by a few years, full of an energy I hadn't felt in years. He had this calm confidence, the kind that drew people in effortlessly. His presence filled a room without demanding it. When he smiled at me for the first time, it wasn't the kind of smile that seeks attention, it was one that saw me. Not the pastor's wife. Me. I told myself it was harmless. After all, I was a married woman, a pastor's wife, no less. What could possibly happen? But every time our eyes met, something shifted. It was small at first, a spark I tried to ignore. But sparks, if ignored long enough, start fires. That night, after everyone went to bed, I sat by the retreat center's balcony overlooking the quiet lake. The moon reflected on the water, the air smelled of wet grass, and for the first time in years, I felt something stirring in me, something dangerous and alive. Then I heard footsteps behind me, soft and slow. It was Daniel. He asked if he could sit beside me. I nodded, though my heart was already racing. We talked for what felt like hours, about life, music, faith, emptiness, and everything in between. He didn't look at me the way people in church did. He looked at me as if I was human, not holy. And somewhere between laughter and silence, I felt a connection form, fragile, forbidden, and completely real. I should have left. I should have walked back to my room and prayed for strength. But instead, I stayed. Because for once, I wanted to stop being the woman everyone needed, and just be the woman someone wanted. When he brushed a strand of hair from my face, I didn't pull away. I closed my eyes, not because I was surrendering to him, but because I was surrendering to everything I had repressed for so long. It wasn't about sin. It was about feeling alive again. That night, I didn't forget that I was married to a pastor. I forgot what it meant to always be perfect. I forgot the constant watchful eyes, the endless expectations, the weight of living for others. I simply remembered myself. And that, perhaps, was my greatest sin of all. The next morning, I woke up early, as I always did. I prayed, dressed modestly, and joined the others for breakfast. Everything looked the same. The wooden tables, the smell of coffee, the sound of gospel songs playing from someone's phone. Yet inside me, everything had changed. It was as if something had quietly broken during the night, something invisible but deeply felt. I couldn't stop thinking about Daniel. His laughter lingered in my mind, the way he listened without judgment, the warmth in his eyes when he said my name. It wasn't supposed to matter, but it did. I told myself it was just admiration, a harmless moment between two adults who connected briefly. But even as I tried to bury the memory, I felt my pulse quicken whenever I saw him across the room. Throughout that day, I noticed things I hadn't before, the small ways he treated others, his gentle humility, how he carried himself with confidence but without pride. And when he smiled at me during a group discussion, it felt like a secret shared only between us. By evening, I was restless. My husband had been busy all day leading the retreat, surrounded by people, never once looking my way except when he needed me to pass him notes or water. I had grown used to being invisible, but now that someone had noticed me, the invisibility burned. When the service ended that night, everyone lingered around the campfire outside. The stars were bright, the air heavy with the scent of smoke and pine. I stood apart from the group, staring into the flames. I didn't see Daniel approach, but I felt him before I saw him, his quiet presence standing beside me, close enough that I could feel his breath mix with the cold night air. He didn't speak at first. Neither did I. We just stood there, two people surrounded by the noise of laughter and worship songs, yet completely alone in a silence that said everything words couldn't. Finally, he whispered, "You looked like you needed some company." I smiled, though it felt fragile. "I probably shouldn't. I know," he said softly, "but sometimes what we shouldn't do is what reminds us we're still alive." His words hit harder than they should have. I turned to look at him, and our eyes met again, longer this time, deeper. That moment stretched, heavy with meaning. I could feel the line between right and wrong trembling beneath my feet. I knew I was crossing it already, even if nothing physical had happened yet. The emotional line, the one people rarely talk about but always feel, was the first to blur. He wasn't touching me, yet I felt touched. He wasn't confessing desire, yet I felt desired. And I was responding, not with words, but with the quiet acceptance of someone who had been starving for attention. When he reached for my hand, I didn't pull away. His fingers brushed mine, tentative and unsure, like asking permission without words. I let them stay. That simple touch was more powerful than any sermon I'd ever heard. It was warm, dangerous, and alive. I told myself it would stop there, that I could still go back, still pray this away, still be the faithful wife everyone believed I was. But in truth, I didn't want to stop it. That night, lying in my bed beside my husband who fell asleep mid-prayer, I realized that temptation doesn't always roar, it whispers, it lingers, it offers comfort where there's been coldness for too long. The next day, Daniel avoided me. I thought it would hurt, but it only deepened the pull. The distance made me crave the connection more. Every stolen glance across the room became a secret conversation. Every accidental brush of his arm felt electric. By the time the retreat ended, I knew the danger wasn't behind me, it was waiting. Because you can't share that kind of intimacy, however innocent it looks from the outside, without awakening something that refuses to sleep again. When it was time to leave, Daniel helped load the instruments into the van. As I walked by, he looked at me one last time and said, "Take care of yourself." I wanted to say you too, but what I meant was don't forget me. I didn't know it then, but that night by the fire wasn't the end, it was the beginning. The first line I crossed wasn't physical. It was emotional. And once a woman's heart begins to wander, her body only follows the map her soul has already drawn. That was the night I realized how easy it is to betray someone's trust without even touching them. 2 weeks had passed since the retreat ended, but Daniel's presence never left me. His voice lingered in my head during sermons. His smile flashed in my memory when I washed dishes or folded laundry. I found myself checking my phone more than I should have, half hoping for a message that would never come. And then one day, it did. A simple text. "I'll be in town for a concert. Would love to see you again if that's okay." I stared at the message for what felt like an hour. My first instinct was to delete it and pray. My second was to reply, "I can't." But my third, the one that came from a quieter, more honest place inside me, whispered, "You want to." I told myself it would just be coffee. Just a conversation between two adults who shared a moment of understanding. Nothing more. But deep down, I knew that meeting him again meant stepping over a line that could never be uncrossed. That Saturday afternoon, I told my husband I was visiting a friend from the Women's Fellowship. He smiled and told me to drive safe, then went back to working on his sermon. I watched him from the doorway, the man I had promised forever to, and I felt a sharp ache in my chest. Not guilt, not yet. Just a deep, hollow sadness for what we had lost long before this moment. Daniel chose a small cafe by the park. When I arrived, he was already there, waiting by the window. He stood up as soon as he saw me, his face lighting up in a way that made my heart flutter and ache at the same time. I hadn't felt seen like that in years. Our conversation started lightly, music, travel, the retreat. But the longer we talked, the closer the air between us seemed to grow. There was a pull in his eyes, a softness that told me he remembered everything too, the lake, the firelight, that quiet night when we both forgot who we were supposed to be. At one point, he reached across the table, his fingers brushing mine, and the world seemed to stop. The cafe noise faded, the rain outside blurred the view, and all I could hear was the sound of my heartbeat. I shouldn't have asked you here, he said softly. But I couldn't stop thinking about you. His honesty disarmed me. I looked away, but my body betrayed me. I didn't pull my hand back. I couldn't. The warmth of his skin against mine felt like a confession all on its own. When we finally left the cafe, it was raining harder. He offered to walk me to my car, and though I knew I should have said goodbye there, I didn't. Instead, we lingered under the small awning by the side of the building, the air thick with silence and everything we weren't saying. The rain became our cover. The world blurred behind it. He took a small step closer, hesitating, as if asking for permission without words. And when his hand reached my face, brushing away a strand of wet hair, I didn't move. I wanted to be held, not as the pastor's wife or as anyone's example, but as a woman who hadn't felt warmth in far too long. He didn't kiss me, not yet. But the closeness, the breath shared between us, the trembling anticipation, it felt more intimate than any touch. When he finally whispered, "Come with me for a little while," my heart screamed no, but my silence said yes. We drove in silence. The sound of rain on the car roof filled the space between us. Every minute felt like a question I didn't want to answer. When we reached his hotel, he turned off the engine but didn't move. I should have left then. But when he looked at me, that same look that first made me feel alive again, I opened the door and followed him inside. In that small, dimly lit room, time stopped being real. The world outside didn't exist. There was only warmth, the scent of rain-soaked clothes, and the undeniable truth that I was crossing every boundary I had ever lived by. He touched my hand again, gentle, uncertain, as if giving me a chance to walk away. But I didn't. Because in that moment, I wasn't the pastor's wife. I wasn't the example. I was just a woman who had forgotten what it felt like to be wanted, seen, and alive. When I left the hotel later that night, the rain had stopped. The city was quiet, washed clean, but I wasn't. My heart was heavy, my soul unsteady. And yet, beneath the guilt, there was something even more dangerous. I didn't regret it. That night, I forgot I was married to a pastor. I only remembered I was human. Morning light always finds the truth. It crept through my bedroom curtains that Sunday, warm and unforgiving, spilling across the sheets like a spotlight on everything I wished I could hide. My husband was already awake, humming softly as he prepared for service. His presence felt both familiar and foreign, like a melody I used to love but could no longer sing along to. I lay there staring at the ceiling, feeling the weight of what I'd done pressing on my chest. The night with Daniel played in fragments, a hand, a whisper, the sound of rain. Each memory felt both tender and heavy, like a secret too beautiful and too terrible to carry. When my husband came to kiss my forehead before leaving for church, I froze. His lips brushed my skin, and for the first time in our marriage, I didn't feel safe in his touch. I felt exposed. I smiled anyway, because that's what I'd been trained to do. Smile. Be composed. Be the perfect pastor's wife. But perfection had left me now. It had slipped away quietly into the night with Daniel. The hours that followed felt like punishment. Every verse, every song, every prayer echoed in my head, twisting like a knife. Confess your sins one to another, my husband preached passionately that morning, his voice filling the church. I almost laughed, not because it was funny, but because it felt like the universe was mocking me. I wanted to pray. I truly did. But every time I tried, my words got stuck somewhere between my throat and my guilt. How do you talk to God when you've betrayed his servant? How do you kneel when your heart is still pulsing with the memory of someone else's hands? There came a day when I couldn't carry it alone anymore. Not because I was about to break, but because I finally understood something profound. Forgiveness isn't earned by punishment, it's found through honesty with yourself. I didn't confess to my husband. Not out of fear, but because I knew it would destroy more than it would heal. He didn't deserve the weight of my weakness. Instead, I confessed to God. Not with grand words, not with tears, but with a quiet, trembling heart that had finally grown tired of hiding. It wasn't an instant redemption. Forgiveness doesn't happen overnight. It comes in waves, some soft, some rough, until one day, you realize you can breathe again. I started spending more time alone in the chapel when no one was around. I'd sit there in silence, sometimes for hours, letting the stillness wash over me. I stopped asking why it happened, and started asking what it meant. And slowly, I realized it wasn't just a story of betrayal, it was a story of awakening. For years, I had lived as a shadow of who I was meant to be, serving, giving, performing. I had mistaken spiritual duty for emotional connection. But that night, as wrong as it was, forced me to confront a truth I had buried too deep. I had stopped loving myself long before I ever loved someone else. Daniel never reached out again after that last message. Sometimes I wonder if he carries the same quiet guilt I do, or if he's found peace in his own way. I don't hate him. I don't even regret meeting him. Because for all the pain and confusion, that chapter taught me more about grace than any sermon ever could. My husband and I are still together. And in an unexpected way, our relationship has changed. He doesn't know why, but I started listening more, laughing more, reaching out for his hand when he prays. I began to love him not as the pastor everyone reveres, but as the man who once looked at me with the same tenderness Daniel did. Slowly, something between us softened, not perfect, but real. Maybe that's what redemption looks like. Not erasing the past, but transforming it. I've learned that faith isn't about never falling, it's about finding your way back after you do. The night I forgot I was married to a pastor will always be a part of me, but so will the lessons it left behind, about loneliness, desire, honesty, and forgiveness. Now, when I stand beside my husband at the pulpit and smile at the crowd, it's not the same practiced smile I used to wear. It's gentler, quieter, and more human. Because beneath it, there's a woman who has faced her own darkness and still chosen to seek the light. My secret still follows me, yes, but not like a shadow anymore. It walks beside me, reminding me of both my weakness and my strength. And every time I look in the mirror, I see someone who has learned to forgive, not just what she did, but the parts of her that once needed to do it. Because sometimes, the greatest redemption isn't being spotless. It's being real. Life doesn't always break us where we're weakest. Sometimes it breaks us where we've been pretending to be strongest. For years, she was the perfect wife, the perfect woman of faith. But perfection is heavy, and no one can carry it forever. Her story isn't one of scandal, it's one of humanity. Of how even the most faithful hearts can falter, and yet still find their way back to grace. If this story moved you, reminded you of your own silent battles, or simply made you feel something, then remember, every story has a purpose, and sometimes that purpose is healing. This story is a fictionalized adaptation inspired by true experiences, shared anonymously for emotional and reflective purposes. It is not intended to promote infidelity, but to explore the human side of choices, guilt, and forgiveness. Viewer discretion is advised. This content is meant for mature audiences only. Thank you for watching Truth Scandal Stories, where real emotions meet untold confessions. If you found this story powerful, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Your support helps bring more true life stories to light. Tap the notification bell so you never miss a moment of truth, emotion, and storytelling that speaks straight to the heart. Because sometimes, the truth we hide is the story that sets us free.